Hallows Eve. Goedemiddag.
Hoi hoi, hello and welcome to the Meet Maastricht podcast. I'm Katrina and together with our resident local Lucy, we will be exploring some of the amazing stories that make Maastricht so special. So sit back, relax and join us as we learn about our favourite Dutch city. Welcome everyone to episode 10 of the Meet Maastricht podcast. This is an Ask a Local episode. And I'm here with Lucy. How are you, Lucy?
Fine. Getting a bit jumpy with being inside too much, but yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people can relate to that. So for this episode, we got a question on Instagram. And make sure you send us in your questions because we love seeing them and trying to answer them.
Yes.
So this question, they were sort of a two-parter. So they wanted to learn more about Dutch traditions involving burials and commemorating the dead, and also to know more about the Maastricht Cemetery on oh man, I get myself all stressed. Tongersueg. Tongersueg.
Yeah, fine. Yeah.
So so just more about burials and cemeteries here in Maastricht, and that one
Good.
in particular.
Yeah. Well, I think we've only got one, the city of Maastricht. That is, of course, there are more cemeteries in what is now the city, but they belonged to what were formerly independent villages. Anyway, Dutch traditions on burials. The main thing to remember here is that Dutch is not monocultural. Of course, no entity ever is, wherever you are, in whatever time period. But the great divide in the Netherlands, you will always have to keep in mind, in contemporary the Netherlands, stems from the great division between the Catholics and the Protestants.
Yeah.
So the Reformation, starting in the late 15th, 16th century, aimed at improving the workings of the Catholic Church. There was a lot of criticism of corruption and excess and fooling the people and stuff like that. And it resulted in a not so much in a reformation of the Church, at any rate not along the lines that the reformers intended, but in a split. So the Roman Catholic Church split, and the branch that split off in those times called themselves the Protestants, and of course the Protestant branch has split off in many different branches and twigs and stuff as well.
Yeah.
And it is in Dutch history and culture and politics. It is an important feature, and it is something that you will see come up in all sorts of ways in pretty much every story about the history of any place in this country, but especially in Maastricht, because here Roman Catholicism was not wiped out, not by a long shot, but there has been a Protestant overlord for 500 years. So of course you notice that in the culture, in the buildings, in the traditions. So that for background, and in the cemetery you can see this. The different denominations have their own segments of the cemetery.
Okay.
And when you go to the cemetery itself, there is an information board there that will indicate these different segments. It started out with the Protestant and Catholic part, so those are the oldest.
Yeah.
There has been a Jewish segment for a long time. It's a walled-off segment. What has been added fairly recently is a segment for Muslim graves, because they are not positioned in the same way as Christian graves. You know, the Muslim dead have.
Yeah, so they're facing Mecca. Yeah.
Yeah. So they are aligned in a different way. And of course, in the 19th century, a big fight, of course, has also taken place around burial space for people who were non-denominational. You know, if you were not a Christian, you could not be buried in this sanctified earth of a Catholic or Protestant cemetery. But of course, the socialists had to be buried somewhere.
Yeah.
So that was also a separate addition made to the cemetery for the non-denominational people. And of course, the more recent segments that have been added, all these divisions on religious grounds are no longer visible. What is still very visible is the different places where war graves are gathered together. So both from the First and the Second World War, there are specific places where memorials and series of headstones of the fallen are gathered together, ordered by the nationality they had or the conflict they died in. Okay. So there are these segments of war graves. And then, of course, the latest edition of the cemetery reflects changes in burial practices. Of course, for centuries it has been common to put a body of a deceased in a coffin and bury a coffin, and for those who had the money to do so, to put a gravestone on that. Of course, for the people without money, the procedure was entirely different. They would be put in the ground in cloth, or definitely not in a wooden coffin.
Right.
And there would be a wooden cross on the spot to mark the spot where they were buried. And when the cross had pretty much been weathered away, the spot was used again. So, poor people's graveyards have a totally different sort of aspect. And of course, this particular graveyard at the Thomasweg had segments of that as well. And it had a segment where the graves of the babies and the small children who died are gathered together. That is a very moving spot. Those very young lives lost underneath those very old trees.
Yeah.
And then when you go further out, the trees are younger and the monuments are smaller, because people are beginning to choose cremation more often over fully fledged burials, in a coffin with a headstone. So there will be urns buried in the ground and with small memorial stones. There will also be walls where urns with the ashes of the deceased can be put. There will be spaces as well where the ashes can be dispersed. So and I think they are doing restorations and additions right now at the cemetery, and I think those will accommodate even more of the contemporary ideas about burial and remembrance. So it might just be possible to be buried there together with your favorite tree, and then I don't mean to be flippant here, but there is this of course would be a beautiful representation of the old saying or the old prayer or the old wish of ashes to ashes. We have our spin on this earth, and we come from somewhere, we go back to somewhere, and nobody knows. And in the usual light-hearted, tongue-in-cheek Maastricht way, we have this happy little song about saying, I'll say it in Maastricht first. En as de doedbus groeit er gras op de boek. Again, not to be flippant, this is an old song, and it says, when you're dead, grass will grow on your belly. and it seems people are slowly tending toward, just fine with me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't feel like, for me personally, that just makes me smile.
Of course, the Catholic Church has been saying this for centuries, ashes to ashes. It is the theme of Ash Wednesday, the start of Lent, the 40-day period before Easter.
Yeah.
And when you go to church and kneel down in front of the priest, who will put a cross on your head of ashes, of burned bush, and it's it signifies, remember, you are mortal. So it's a very old theme, and of course it would be in any kind of religious or spiritual context. But quite apart from that, it's simply a physical fact.
Yeah.
So cemeteries reflect these things. Anyway, something else about cemetery? Oh, what we do there, traditions and stuff. Yeah. Of course, this is the ceremonies in these parts. Of course, are this being a predominantly historically Catholic area are pretty much Catholic traditions, and the main one being the 2nd of November, which is All Souls Day. So not the All Saints of the 1st of November, which the Anglo-Saxon world celebrates, I think, or remembers as Halloween.
Yeah, it's the 31st of October. Yeah.
It is All Hallows Eve. It is the eve before All Saints Day.
Ah, okay.
And to us, the mainland non-Anglo-Saxon Catholics, that is alien.
Yeah.
And of course you see it being commercialized now. And everybody, loads of people just participating mindlessly and happily in something that is imported, which is, of course, the way it often goes with traditions. They're not necessarily from the spot where they are celebrated.
No.
So Halloween is Anglo-Saxon,
Yes.
and they're very ancient Anglo-Saxon as well. What the Catholic tradition is All Souls Day, so that is all the deceased, not all the saints, the holy people, but all of the rest of us. And then cemeteries all around the Catholic world will be visited by loads and loads of people, bringing flowers, cleaning the graves. So if you ever want to see a very lively graveyard, that's the day to go. Now, in many Catholic countries, and here too, until the 19th century, but still now in many Catholic parts, people used to treat the cemetery as a park and go there to picnic on the graves, and nobody thought then or thinks now bad of that. And the Maastricht Cemetery, treated as a park by all means to a certain extent. It is a gorgeous place.
Yeah.
But I think picnicking will be frowned on. That's don't do that.
No.
That is so the 2nd of November is a particular Catholic thing.
Yeah.
And then there are, of course, the ceremonies connected to the war. I mentioned there are several segments dedicated to war graves. And there will be ceremonies and wreath laying and graves of resistance fighters and bombing victims being decorated with blooming chrysanthemums. Around mid-September, which is when Maastricht was liberated. That was not the end of the Second World War in the Netherlands, but that was when Maastricht was liberated.
Yeah.
And then the national liberation is commemorated on May 4th. That is the national remembrance of the war dead.
Yes.
And then so we've just had that in a very peculiar way, because of course no spectators were allowed, but the wreath laying did take place. So if you go to the cemetery by yourself now, you will probably still find the wreaths that the authorities have put up there.
Yeah.
To commemorate the fallen.
Are there graves of sort of enemy soldiers there as well, or would they have all been taken home?
Quite a few of them have been, but in Eselstein, further north in the province of Limburg, there is a large cemetery where the German war dead have been gathered. And I think, I seem to remember, I'm not exactly sure, that in the former independent village of Heer, there is a small war cemetery of German soldiers as well. I'd have
Okay.
to check that. But yes, there are Germans buried in many places where they fought and where they fell.
Yeah.
And in recent years, we've also been seeing that during the war memorial services, German dignitaries will be invited as well.
Yeah.
Because of course, after the Second World War, there was supposed to have been a thorough denazification of Germany, and at any rate, over the decades after the Second World War, now 75 years, the Western Republic of Germany has proven itself a steadfast democratic state. But of course, there has still been quite a bit of resistance about involving the German military in anything.
Yeah.
Anything commemorating those horrible wars. But we do now. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's just not very long ago, is it? It's
No.
I mean, it's obviously steadily getting further and further away, but there is still a lot of people who have strong memories of their parents or grandparents or themselves even. So I can imagine. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I hope this gives some idea of traditions and an inkling of what you may find at the gorgeous Donnersweg Cemetery.
Yeah.
And of the ceremonies that are held there from time to time, and which of course are in normal circumstances are all open to the public. It is a public space, so you can just go there.
Yeah. I think another part of the question was just about the chapel.
Yeah, it is in the outlay of the cemetery as it was made. You know, of course, they had landscaping and garden architects design these places, especially in the 19th century, and they would repeat this pattern of fields of graves centered on a focal point. And one of these focal points is the one where the chapel is located. And so it is in an aesthetic sense, it is a focal point in the park, which the cemetery is also, and it is a memorial place for all the people who paid for a tile, a glazed tile, to be put up on the walls of this chapel to commemorate them. And of course, this is also a tradition that was only accessible to the wealthy. But you can go in there and you can look at these walls and read all these supplications and prayers and thanks, mostly in French, because of course then the upper classes in Maastricht would be also French speaking.
Yeah.
And it's and there will be lots of names that you will be able to recognize. And of course there will be ceremonies there, but it is not a chapel in the sense of a functioning church. It is more a memorial chapel.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting. So I hope we've answered your question. The person who submitted the question. Thank you so much. If you have more questions for Lucy or for any of us, make sure that you send them through on social media or through our website. We've always got links listed. We love to hear from you if you've got any feedback or any comments as well. In the meantime, thank you so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today, and don't forget to follow us on social media. You can find us on Facebook by searching Meet Maastricht and on Instagram at @meet_Maastricht. If you would like to learn more about us, you can also visit our website at meetmaastricht.eu, where you can buy tickets and subscribe to our monthly newsletter so you're always up to date. Thanks again, and tune in next time to learn more about our beautiful city.
Tot ziens.